It started with a storm in the Methau Valley, the kind that shakes the foundation of your house. But the thunder wasn't the scariest thing Sarah heard that night. It was the scratching, the heavy, desperate thud of a body hitting her front door. She expected a bear. She didn't expect a massive silver wolf wearing a shredded tactical vest. And she certainly didn't expect it to turn into a pregnant woman bleeding out on her rug, whispering one warning: "The king is coming, and he leaves no survivors." This is the true story of the siege of Blackwood Cabin. You won't believe who or what arrived 3 hours later. The rain in Washington state doesn't just fall, it erases the world. By 10 p.m. on October 14th, Sarah Miller couldn't see past the railing of her porch. The isolation of her cabin, usually her sanctuary after a double shift at the trauma center in Seattle, felt suffocating. Sarah was 32, a woman composed of sharp edges and practical decisions. She adjusted the heavy wool blanket over her knees and reached for her tea, flinching as a crack of thunder rattled the window panes. The power had been flickering for an hour. Then came the sound. It wasn't the wind. It was a wet, heavy thud against the solid oak of her front door, followed by a low, guttural whine that vibrated through the floorboards. Sarah froze. She was miles from the nearest neighbor. Bears were common, cougars possible. She set her mug down slowly and reached into the side table drawer, her fingers wrapping around the cold steel of her Glock 19. She didn't chamber a round yet, but she flicked the safety off. Another thud. This one sounded like a plea. Sarah moved to the door, peering through the peephole. All she saw was darkness and rain. She cracked the door, chain still on, gun raised. "Hello?" she called out, her voice steady. A massive paw, coated in mud and fresh, bright crimson blood, slapped against the doorframe. Sarah gasped, stumbling back as the door was shoved open, snapping the chain like it was made of paper. A wolf stumbled inside. But this wasn't a wild animal. It was gigantic, easily 200 pounds of silver and charcoal muscle. It was wearing the remnants of a Kevlar tactical harness, shredded as if by shrapnel. The beast took 2 steps into the warmth of the living room, its golden eyes locking onto Sarah's. There was intelligence there, human intelligence, and terror. The wolf collapsed. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her medical training overriding her fear. She holstered the gun and dropped to her knees. "Hey, easy." The sound of bones cracking filled the cabin, a sickening pop and grind that made Sarah dry heave. The wolf's snout retracted, fur receded into pale skin, and the massive paws elongated into trembling human hands. In seconds, the wolf was gone. Lying on the rug was a woman. She was naked, covered in mud, and shivering violently. Her tactical vest was now loose around her human frame. She had a jagged slash across her shoulder, but that wasn't the emergency. Sarah's eyes traveled down. The woman was pregnant, heavily pregnant. The stranger grabbed Sarah's wrist with a grip that felt like iron. Her eyes were still gold, dilated and frantic. "You have to hide us," the woman rasped, coughing up blood. "General Holloway's trackers. They're 2 miles back." "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, already checking the woman's pulse. It was thready, racing at 140. "Captain Lyra Sterling," the woman gasped, wincing as a contraction ripped through her. "1st Battalion, Warwolf Division." She looked at Sarah, her gaze piercing. "My water broke 3 miles ago. The baby is stuck." Sarah looked at the blood pooling beneath Lyra's legs. This wasn't just labor. This was a placental abruption. "I'm a nurse," Sarah said, her voice shifting into command mode. "But I can't help you here. We need a hospital." "No!" Lyra screamed, trying to sit up. "No hospitals. If they find me, they kill the baby. You have to do it here." Do what here? Cut him out, Lyra snarled, her teeth momentarily sharpening into points. Cut him out before I die, or the Alpha King will burn this entire state to the ground to find his heir. The kitchen of the cabin was modern, renovated with quartz countertops and harsh LED lighting, the only sterile environment Sarah had. She had dragged Lyra onto the heavy dining table. The storm outside was intensifying, wind battering the walls like a siege hammer. Sarah had raided her emergency medical kit. She had scalpels, lidocaine, sutures and combat gauze, leftovers from her late father's prepper stash, coupled with her own medical supplies. "Listen to me," Sarah said, tying her hair back. She washed her hands with aggressive speed, dousing them in alcohol. "I don't have general anesthesia. I have local. This is going to hurt. A lot." Lyra was gripping the edges of the table, sweat mingling with the rain on her forehead. "I've taken bullets, human. Just get him out." Sarah injected the lidocaine across Lyra's abdomen, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. The woman's metabolism was too fast. Her body was burning through the drugs as soon as they entered her system. "Who is coming?" Sarah asked, testing the scalpel's edge. She needed to keep the patient talking to monitor her consciousness. "Holloway," Lyra gritted out. "He's a rogue general. He wants the child's blood. It carries the Alpha Prime gene." "And the father." Sarah made the first incision. Lyra let out a guttural, animalistic roar, her back arching off the table. The lights flickered. Sarah worked fast, her hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She cut through the layers of tissue, cauterizing what she could with a heated iron rod she'd placed on the stove, medieval, but necessary to stop the bleeding of a shifter. "The father," Lyra panted, her voice weakening, "is Ronan, the Alpha King. He thinks I betrayed him. He thinks I stole the child." "Did you?" Sarah asked, reaching the uterus. "I stole the child to save it from him," Lyra whispered, tears finally leaking from her golden eyes. "Ronan has gone mad with grief. He's destroying everything. If he gets the boy, he'll turn him into a weapon like me." Sarah didn't have time to process the politics of werewolf warfare. She saw the baby. He was small, but he wasn't silent. As Sarah lifted the infant out, he didn't cry. He growled, a soft, tiny, vibrating sound. He was covered in vernix and blood, human in appearance, but his eyes opened immediately. They were violet. "He's out," Sarah announced, quickly clamping and cutting the cord. She wrapped the infant in a clean towel. "It's a boy." Lyra's head lolled to the side. "Give him to me." Sarah handed the bundle to the mother. Lyra sniffed the baby deeply, her tongue darting out to lick the blood from his forehead. It was a primal, possessive gesture. "His name is Kian," Lyra whispered. Then her eyes rolled back. The monitor Sarah had rigged up, an old pulse oximeter, started beeping erratically. "Lyra!" Sarah shouted. She checked the incision. The uterus wasn't contracting. "You're hemorrhaging." Sarah worked for another hour, stitching, massaging, and injecting Pitocin she had in her emergency bag. The wolf healing factor finally kicked in. The wounds began to knit together with visible speed, steam rising from the incision site. It was 1 a.m. The cabin was silent except for the storm. Sarah washed the blood off her hands in the sink, trembling. She looked out the window. Through the driving rain, she saw headlights. Not one car, a convoy. They were coming up the long driveway. 3 black SUVs and a military-grade transport truck. Lyra woke up on the table, clutching the baby. She sniffed the air. "Is it Ronan?" Sarah asked, grabbing her Glock again. Lyra's face went pale. "No. Ronan smells like pine and ozone. This smells like sulfur and rot." She looked at Sarah. terror in her eyes. "It's Holloway, and he brought the death squad." "Can you walk?" Sarah asked, racking the slide of her Glock. Lyra slid off the table, her legs shaking. She was still pale, but the supernatural vitality of her species was evident. She wrapped the towel tighter around baby Kian. "I can fight." "No, you can't," Sarah snapped. "You just had major abdominal surgery. If you shift, you'll rip your stitches and bleed out in seconds. Take the baby. Go to the basement. There's a storm cellar door that leads out to the creek." "I'm not leaving you," Lyra said, her voice hard. "They'll kill you." "I'm human," Sarah said, though she felt the lie of safety in that statement. "They want the wolf." "They leave no witnesses," Lyra corrected. She moved to the window, peering through the blinds. 16 hostiles, heavily armed. They have silver nitrate rounds. If they hit me, I don't heal. Sarah's mind raced. She wasn't a soldier, but her father had been a paranoia-filled survivalist. The cabin was reinforced. "Kill the lights," Sarah ordered. Lyra flipped the breaker. The cabin plunged into darkness. Outside, the convoy stopped 50 yards from the porch. Floodlights flared to life, blindingly bright, cutting through the rain and illuminating the front of the cabin. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. It was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. "Captain Sterling, we know you're in there. We can smell the afterbirth. It's a very distinct scent." Sarah crawled to the window, staying below the sill. A man stepped out of the lead SUV. He was wearing a long trench coat and holding a cane that looked more like a bludgeon. This had to be Holloway. "Send out the child," Holloway continued, his voice echoing off the trees. "And the human woman lives. Refuse, and we burn the structure with both of you inside." "He's lying," Lyra whispered from the hallway shadows. "He needs the baby alive to extract the marrow. Once he has Kian, we're dead." Sarah looked at her living room. It was her home. She looked at Lyra, a woman she'd known for 3 hours, and the infant with violet eyes. "Do you trust me?" Sarah asked. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." "I have a propane tank hooked up to the gas fireplace," Sarah whispered. "And I have a flare gun in the emergency kit." Sarah grabbed a walkie-talkie from the counter, her only link to the outside world, usually used for logging trucks. She tuned it to the emergency channel, hoping someone, anyone, was listening. "Mayday, mayday," she broadcasted, keeping her voice low. "This is Sarah Miller at the Blackwood cabin. I have hostile paramilitary forces on my property. Shots fired, requesting immediate assistance." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned to Lyra. "Go to the back door. When I signal, you run for the creek." "What are you going to do?" Sarah stood up, holding her Glock in one hand and a road flare in the other. "I'm going to buy us some time." She opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, hands raised. "Hold fire!" Holloway yelled to his men. He smiled, a predatory expression that showed too many teeth. "Smart girl. Where is the captain?" "She's dead," Sarah lied, her voice projecting over the rain. "She died in childbirth. I have the body and the baby inside." Holloway narrowed his eyes. He sniffed the air. "I smell fear and blood. But I also hear 2 heartbeats inside. One fast, one slow." He signaled to the soldiers. "Kill her." Sarah didn't hesitate. She didn't shoot at the men. She turned and fired 3 rounds into the large propane tank sitting on the side of the porch, the one she used for the grill, then dove back inside the house just as Holloway's men opened fire. Bullets shredded the wood where she had just been standing. The sparks from the bullets hit the escaping gas. Boom! The explosion rocked the front of the cabin, blowing the porch apart and sending a wall of fire between the house and the mercenaries. "Run!" Sarah screamed at Lyra. They bolted toward the back door, the heat of the fire licking at their heels. But as they burst out into the backyard, Sarah stopped dead. Standing at the edge of the woods, blocking their path to the creek, were 5 massive wolves. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness. They weren't Holloway's men. They were different, larger, darker. And then a sound cut through the chaos. Not a car, not a truck. The rhythmic thwup, thwup, thup of heavy rotors. Sarah looked up. Descending from the storm clouds like a dark god was a military Black Hawk helicopter, blacked out, with no markings. Lyra fell to her knees, clutching the baby. She looked at the helicopter, then at the wolves blocking the path. "It's too late," Lyra sobbed. "Who is it?" Sarah yelled, raising her gun at the wolves. "It's not Holloway," Lyra said, her voice trembling with a different kind of fear. "It's Ronan. The army has arrived." The helicopter hovered low, the downdraft flattening over the grass. Ropes dropped. Men in matte black armor fast roped down with fluid precision. They hit the ground and immediately formed a perimeter, weapons raised, not at Sarah and Lyra, but at Holloway's men out front. But the figure that jumped from the helicopter without a rope, falling 30 feet and landing in a crouch that cracked the earth, was the one that made Sarah's blood run cold. He stood up slowly. He was 7 feet tall, wearing tactical combat gear, but no helmet. His hair was black as pitch, his face scarred and brutal. His eyes were glowing a furious electric blue. He looked at Lyra. He looked at the baby. Then he looked at Sarah. "General Holloway!" The man roared, his voice louder than the helicopter. "You are trespassing on my territory." Ronan, the Alpha King, had arrived, and he looked ready to murder everyone in sight. The standoff was absolute. On the front lawn, Holloway's mercenaries were regrouping, recovering from the propane explosion. In the backyard, Sarah and Lyra were pinned between the forest wolves and the towering figure of Ronan. Sarah kept her gun raised, aiming it squarely at Ronan's chest. "Don't touch her," Sarah warned. Her hands were shaking, but her aim was true. Ronan tilted his head, looking at the small human woman threatening a creature that could tear a tank apart. A flicker of amusement, or perhaps respect, crossed his face. "Put the weapon down, nurse," Ronan rumbled. His voice vibrated in Sarah's chest. "If I wanted you dead, you would have ceased to exist before you heard my boots hit the ground." "He wants the baby, Sarah," Lyra cried out, stepping back. "Don't let him take Kian." Ronan's eyes snapped to Lyra. The blue glow intensified, swirling like a nebula. "You stole my son, Lyra. You ran. You led dogs to our doorstep." "I saved him," Lyra screamed back. "You were going to send him to the academy. He's an infant, Ronan. He's not a soldier." "He is a king," Ronan roared, stepping forward. The ground seemed to tremble. "And kings are forged, not coddled." "Contact front," one of Ronan's soldiers shouted into his comms. Holloway's men had breached the fire. They came around the side of the house, guns blazing. "Shields!" Ronan barked. The soldiers around him didn't use riot shields. They shifted. In a blur of motion, 4 men, transformed into armored bears, massive, bio-engineered war beasts. They formed a wall of fur and muscle around Lyra, Sarah, and the king, absorbing the hail of bullets. Ronan didn't shift. He simply walked through the line of his bear guards, walking straight into the gunfire coming from Holloway's men. Sarah watched in horror and awe. Bullets hit Ronan's armor and flattened. One grazed his cheek, drawing blood that healed instantly. He reached the first mercenary, a man holding an assault rifle. Ronan backhanded him. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. The mercenary flew 20 feet, hitting a pine tree with a bone-shattering crunch. Holloway, seeing the tide turn, shifted. He was a large wolf, brown and mange-ridden, but fast. He lunged for Lyra, bypassing Ronan. "Sarah, look out!" Lyra shrieked. Sarah didn't think. She saw the brown wolf mid-air, jaws snapping toward the baby Lyra was holding. Sarah tackled Lyra, knocking her to the ground and shielding the baby with her own body. Halloway's jaws clamped onto Sarah's left arm. She screamed as teeth met bone. Then, the world exploded in blue light. Ronan was there. He didn't shift. He grabbed Halloway by the scruff of the neck and the hind leg, lifting the massive wolf into the air as if he were a stuffed toy. With a roar that silenced the thunder, Ronan slammed Halloway onto a jagged rock. The crack was final. Halloway went limp. Ronan tossed the carcass aside and dropped to his knees beside Sarah. The pain was blinding. Sarah clutched her mangled arm, blood pouring through her fingers. "You saved him," Ronan said, his voice strangely quiet. He looked at his son, safe in Lyra's arms beneath Sarah. Then he looked at Sarah's wound. "You saved my heir." "I'm a nurse," Sarah gritted out, fighting unconsciousness. "It's what I do." Ronan ripped a patch from his uniform and tied a tourniquet around her arm with practiced efficiency. "You are bleeding, human, and you have been bitten by a rogue. The infection spreads fast." "Am I going to turn?" Sarah asked, vision blurring. Ronan scooped her up in his arms. He felt like granite and heat. "No! You are not strong enough to survive the turn. You are dying." He turned to his men. "Medevac, now! We fly to the Citadel." "No," Lyra pleaded, grabbing Ronan's arm. "She can't go to the Citadel. The Council will kill her. No humans allowed." Ronan looked down at Sarah, whose eyes were fluttering shut. He looked at the blood on her shirt, blood shed to protect his family. "She is not human anymore," Ronan declared, his voice carrying over the wind. "She is Pack." He looked at Lyra. "And she is under my protection. If the Council has a problem with it, they can take it up with me." Sarah's head lolled against Ronan's chest armor. The last thing she heard was the helicopter engines spooling up and the heartbeat of the Alpha King. Slow, steady, and terrifyingly strong. Sarah woke up to the smell of antiseptic and snow. She wasn't in a hospital room. She was in a cathedral of glass and steel. The ceiling vaulted high above her, revealing a grey, churning sky that looked nothing like the Washington weather she knew. She tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea slammed her back against the pillows. Her left arm was heavy, encased in a strange, shimmering black cast that hummed with a low frequency. "Don't move," a deep voice commanded. Sarah turned her head. Sitting in a leather armchair in the corner of the room was Ronan. The Alpha King looked different without his tactical armor. He wore a charcoal button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and covered in faint white scars. He was reading a file, glasses perched on his nose, a stark contrast to the berserker god she had seen tear a wolf apart the night before. "Where am I?" Sarah rasped. Her throat felt like it was filled with glass. Ronan stood and poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. He moved with a predatory grace that made Sarah's heart rate spike on the monitor beside her bed. "You are in the Citadel," Ronan said, handing her the water. His fingers brushed hers, sending a jolt of electricity through her that had nothing to do with the static in the air. "It is the seat of the Northern Dominion, located in the Canadian Rockies. We are 300 miles from civilization." Sarah drank greedily. "Lyra, the baby." "Lyra is recovering in the nursery wing," Ronan said, his expression hardening slightly. "Kian is healthy. He has my eyes." "And Halloway?" "Dead," Ronan said flatly. "But his employer is not." Sarah looked at her arm. "You said I was dying." Ronan pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. For the first time, Sarah saw the exhaustion etched into his features. "The bite of a rogue wolf carries a necrotic venom. Usually it kills a human in hours. But you—" He paused, studying her face intensely. You didn't die. Your body is fighting it. But the fever is high. You've been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days? Sarah tried to sit up again, panic rising. I have a job. I have a life. People will be looking for me. Your cabin burned down, Ronan said calmly. A gas leak explosion. Tragically, Sarah Miller perished in the fire. The authorities have already closed the case. Sarah stared at him, the blood draining from her face. You erased me? I saved you, Ronan corrected, his voice dropping an octave. Holloway was a mercenary. He was hired by someone powerful within my own council. If the world knows you are alive, they will come for you to get to me. You are a loose end, Sarah. And in my world, loose ends are cut. So I'm a prisoner, Sarah whispered, anger cutting through her fear. No, Ronan said. He leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto hers. You are a guest, and you are something else. What? My wolves respected you. You stood between a monster and my son. You took a bite meant for a queen. Ronan hesitated, a rare look of vulnerability crossing his stoic face. The pack senses intent. They smell bravery. When I carried you onto that helicopter, my personal guard, men who haven't bowed to anyone but me in a decade, they bowed to you. Sarah looked away, overwhelmed. I just did what I had to do. That is what makes you dangerous, Ronan murmured, and valuable. The door hissed open. Lyra walked in. She looked remarkably healed, her skin glowing, though her eyes were tired. She was holding baby Kian. Sarah, Lyra smiled, a genuine, warm expression. She walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. I thought we lost you. I'm tough, Sarah managed a weak smile. She looked at Ronan, then at Lyra. So, you two are. Lyra laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Me and Ronan? Goddess, no. We are siblings, Sarah. Half-siblings. Same father. Sarah blinked. But you said he was the father of the baby. He is, Lyra said, her face falling. Biologically, our father was obsessed with bloodlines. He forced a surrogacy. It's complicated. And gross. That's why I ran. I didn't want Kian raised in that toxicity. I didn't think Ronan would understand. I thought he was just like our father. Lyra looked at Ronan. I was wrong. He's not. Ronan looked at his sister, then at his son. I will burn the old laws to ash before I let Kian suffer as we did. Suddenly, the alarms in the citadel began to blare. A red light pulsed in the room. Ronan stood up instantly, his demeanor shifting from brother to king. He tapped his earpiece. Report. He listened for a second, his face turning into a mask of rage. Stay here, Ronan ordered Sarah. Guard the door, Lyra. What is it? Sarah asked. The council, Ronan growled. They've arrived early, and they've brought the inquisitors. They know a human is here. Sarah didn't stay in the room. 20 minutes after Ronan left, she forced herself out of bed. The black cast on her arm acted like an exoskeleton, supporting the damaged tissue. She felt weak, feverish, but the adrenaline was back. You can't go out there, Lyra hissed, blocking the doorway with the baby in her arms. They will kill you on sight. The law of secrecy is absolute. No humans inside the citadel. Ronan is walking into a trap, isn't he? Sarah asked, leaning against the doorframe. Holloway was hired by a council member. That means the person trying to kill this baby is in that room with him right now. Lyra hesitated. It's Victor Draven, the High Counselor. He's always wanted the throne. If he can prove Ronan broke the sacred law by harboring a human, he can challenge him for the crown without a fight. Then I need to be there, Sarah said. I'm the evidence. If I'm dead, Ronan looks guilty. If I'm alive, I can testify." "Testify?" Lyra looked at her like she was insane. "This isn't a courtroom, Sarah. It's a pit." "Take me to him." The council chamber was a circular amphitheatre built of black obsidian. 12 elders sat on high stone thrones, looking down into the centre of the pit. Ronan stood alone in the centre. He was stripped to the waist, a customary sign of submission to the council's judgment, though he looked anything but submissive. His body was a map of scars, and he stood with his hands loose at his sides, watching the man on the highest throne. Victor Draven was sleek, silver-haired, and wore a suit that cost more than Sarah's entire life earnings. He smiled with the same predatory glint Holloway had possessed. "The charge is treason," Draven announced, his voice smooth and amplified by the acoustics of the room. "King Ronan has brought a human into the heart of the Dominion. He has exposed our existence. He has endangered the pack." "She saved my heir," Ronan roared, his voice shaking the stone walls. "She did what my own guard failed to do. She holds the honor of the pack more than you do, Draven." "She is meat," Draven sneered, "a pet, and by bringing her here, you have forfeited your right to rule. The law states clearly, any alpha who breaks the veil must be stripped of rank." Draven stood up. "I call for a vote of no confidence, and I call for the immediate execution of the human trespasser." The other elders murmured. They looked torn. Ronan was powerful, but the law was their religion. "Bring her out," Draven commanded. "My guards found her room empty. She is hiding in the vents like a rat." "I'm right here," Sarah said. The heavy double doors at the top of the amphitheatre swung open. Sarah stood there, wearing a silk robe she had found in the room, her black cast gleaming. She looked pale, sweat beading on her forehead, but she stood tall. Lyra stood behind her, baby Kian strapped to her chest, a gun in her hand. The room went silent. The scent of fresh human blood, Sarah's wound had reopened slightly under the stress, filled the air. Ronan looked up, his eyes widening. "Sarah, get out!" Sarah ignored him. She walked down the stone stairs, her bare feet making no sound. She walked right past the shocked guards and stepped into the pit, standing beside Ronan. She looked up at Draven. "You hired General Holloway?" Draven laughed. "The fever speaks. The human is delirious." "I removed a bullet from Lyra's abdomen," Sarah said, her voice projecting clearly. "It was a customized round, silver nitrate core, polymer tip. I recognized the markings because my father was a weaponsmith. But I also found something else." Sarah reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a small, blood-crusted object. It wasn't a bullet. It was a chaotic mess of metal. But one piece was intact. A signet ring. "Holloway was wearing this on a chain around his neck," Sarah lied. She held up her own father's class ring, too far away for them to see the details, but shiny enough to catch the light. It has the Draven family crest. It was a bluff, a massive, dangerous bluff. Sarah had found no ring. She was gambling on Draven's arrogance. Draven's eyes narrowed. For a split second, he looked at his own hand, checking for his ring. That split second was all the council needed. They saw the hesitation. "He checks his hand," Ronan growled, catching the tell. "He checks to see if he lost it." "Lies!" Draven shouted, his composure cracking. "She is a lying human whore. Kill her! Kill them all!" Draven didn't wait for the guards. He leaped from the high throne, shifting in mid-air. He didn't turn into a wolf. He turned into something worse. A lichen, a hybrid beast, standing 8 feet tall on 2 legs, massive claws extending like knives. He landed in the pit, shaking the floor. "I challenge for the crown!" Draven roared, his voice a distorted boom. "Right here, right now. To the death! Ronan stepped in front of Sarah. He didn't shift. He didn't have time. Accepted, Ronan said. The air in the obsidian pit tasted of copper and ozone. It was a scent Sarah Miller was intimately familiar with from the trauma ward. But here, amplified by the enclosed acoustics of the council chamber, it was overwhelming. The circular amphitheatre was silent. 12 elders sat on high stone thrones, carved directly into the black volcanic rock of the mountain, looking down into the arena with impassive, ancient eyes. They were the keepers of the old laws, creatures who had seen centuries rise and fall. But even they leaned forward now, sensing that history was about to bleed before them. In the center of the pit stood Ronan. He had stripped off his shirt, revealing a torso that looked as if it had been chiseled from marble, marred only by the tapestry of white scars, memories of wars fought in the shadows. He stood loose-limbed, his breathing steady, his blue eyes locked on his challenger. He looked terrifyingly human. Opposite him stood the nightmare. Victor Draven had completed his shift. He was no longer a man in an expensive suit. He was a lichen, a corrupted, hulking hybrid form that the purebloods despised but feared. He stood nearly 9 feet tall on hind legs that were thick as tree trunks. His fur was a matted, oily grey, and his claws were jagged scythes, dripping with saliva that sizzled when it hit the stone floor. This form was designed for one thing: slaughter. Sarah stood at the edge of the pit, her knuckles white as she gripped the cold iron railing. Beside her, Lyra was trembling, clutching baby Kian so tight the infant let out a soft whimper. "He can't fight that thing in human skin," Sarah whispered, panic clawing at her throat. "Why doesn't he shift? Why doesn't he turn into the wolf?" "Because of the insult," Lyra replied, her voice barely audible over the low, vibrating growl emanating from Draven. Draven challenged his right to rule as a king. If Ronan shifts, he admits he needs the wolf to defeat a traitor. To keep the crown, he has to prove his man is stronger than Draven's beast. It's arrogance, Sarah. Beautiful, stupid arrogance. "It's suicide," Sarah breathed. Down in the pit, Draven threw his head back and roared. The sound was physical, a shockwave that rattled the teeth of everyone in the room. "Prepare yourself, Majesty." Draven's voice was a distorted, grinding rasp. "I will mount your head on the citadel gates before the sun sets." Ronan didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply raised one hand, palm open, in a gesture of invitation. "Come and take it, Victor." The violence, when it started, was too fast for human eyes to track. Draven launched himself across the 30 feet, separating them in a blur of grey fur. The stone floor cracked under the explosive force of his takeoff. He swung a claw the size of a butcher's cleaver, aiming to decapitate Ronan in a single stroke. Sarah screamed, flinching. But Ronan wasn't there. He had moved, not with the speed of a wolf, but with the fluid, impossible precision of a master combatant. He had ducked under the swing, the wind of the claw passing inches above his hair. As he pivoted, he drove a fist into Draven's exposed solar plexus. It sounded like a sledgehammer hitting a side of beef. Draven doubled over, breathless for a fraction of a second. Ronan didn't hesitate. He spun, driving his elbow into the side of the beast's snout, shattering cartilage. Draven roared in pain and swiped blindly. This time he connected. The claws raked across Ronan's chest, shredding skin and muscle. Blood sprayed across the black stone, bright and red. "Ronan!" Sarah cried out, instinctively climbing onto the railing, ready to jump into the pit. "Stay back." Lyra yanked her down, her eyes wide with terror. "If you enter the ring, the guards will execute you both for violating the sanctity of the duel. You have to let him fight." Ronan rolled backward, coming up into a crouch. He looked down at the 4 deep gashes on his chest. Blood poured down his stomach, soaking into the waistband of his tactical pants. He smiled. It was a dark, feral thing. "Is that it?" Ronan taunted, his voice echoing off the walls. "I've had deeper scratches from bramble bushes." Dreven snarled, humiliated. He charged again, abandoning strategy for pure, overwhelming force. He was a whirlwind of claws and teeth, a meat grinder on 2 legs. Ronan was forced on the defensive. He weaved, parried, and dodged. But the sheer size of the lichen was a disadvantage that skill alone was struggling to overcome. He took a heavy blow to the shoulder that sent him skidding across the pit. Another swipe caught his thigh. Sarah watched, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was analyzing the fight not as a spectator, but as a medical professional. Ronan is losing blood too fast. His movements are slowing. The lichen has too much mass, too much reach. If he takes a hit to the cranium, it's over. Dreven cornered Ronan against the high wall of the pit. The beast loomed over the king, drool dripping onto Ronan's bloody shoulder. "Die," Dreven hissed, raising both claws for a disemboweling strike. Ronan's eyes suddenly flared. The blue electric glow that had been simmering there ignited into a blinding white light. "I am the storm," Ronan whispered. He didn't dodge. He stepped into the guard. He caught Dreven's descending wrists. The sound of the impact was like a thunderclap. For a frozen moment, the impossible happened. The human-sized king held the massive arms of the lichen in place. Muscles on Ronan's arms bulged, veins standing out like steel cables. The stone beneath his boots turned to powder as he anchored himself. Ronan roared, a sound that wasn't human, a sound that tapped into the primal frequency of the alpha. With a twist of his hips and a surge of supernatural power, he threw Dreven. He didn't just push him, he launched the 800-pound beast over his shoulder. Dreven flew through the air, crashing into the center of the pit with a bone-jarring thud that shook the entire mountain. Before Dreven could scramble up, Ronan was on him. Ronan straddled the beast's chest. He began to rain down punches. Left, right. Each blow carried the weight of a freight train. Dreven's snout shattered. Teeth flew like confetti. The arrogance of the challenger evaporated, replaced by the terrified whining of a beaten dog. Ronan stopped. He was breathing hard, blood dripping from his nose and chest, his knuckles raw. He grabbed Dreven by the throat, his fingers digging into the thick fur. "Yield," Ronan commanded. "Yield, and I will grant you a quick death." Dreven was wheezing, blood bubbling from his ruined mouth. His eyes darted frantically around the room, landing on the council, then back at Ronan. "I," Dreven choked out, "I yield." The tension in the room snapped. The council elders began to rise. It was over. The king had prevailed. Sarah let out a breath she felt she had been holding for an hour. She sagged against Lyra, relief washing over her. But then she saw it. From her vantage point above the pit, the angle allowed her to see something Ronan couldn't. Dreven's right hand, hidden beneath the bulk of his hip, was moving. It wasn't moving in a gesture of surrender. It was reaching into a hidden compartment in the tattered remains of his tactical belt. A glint of metal. A red, blinking light. Sarah's mind flashed back to her father's survivalist lessons. Red light. Detonator. Dead man's switch. Dreven wasn't just a traitor. He was a suicide bomber. He intended to take the king out with him. "He has a bomb!" Sarah screamed. The sound tore through the silence of the chamber. Ronan looked up, confusion clouding his battle haze. He looked at Sarah, not at Dreven's hand. Dreven's eyes lit up with malicious glee. His thumb hovered over the trigger. Sarah didn't think. She didn't calculate. The instinct that made her a nurse, the instinct to run toward the fire, to put her body between death and the patient, took over. She vaulted over the railing. It was a 15-foot drop. She hit the stone floor of the pit, her ankles screaming in protest, but adrenaline masked the pain. She scrambled forward, a desperate blur of white silk and terror. "Sarah, no!" Ronan shouted, seeing her rush toward them. She dove. She didn't dive for Ronan. She dove for Draven's hand. Just as the Lycan's thumb began to depress the button, Sarah's hands clamped over his. She jammed her fingers into the mechanism, forcing his thumb back, fighting for control of the device. "You bitch!" Draven snarled. With a roar of frustration, Draven backhanded her. But this wasn't a human strike. It was a blow from a creature with the strength to flip cars. His massive, furred knuckles connected with Sarah's ribs. The sound was sickening, a wet, muffled crunch of bone shattering. Sarah was lifted off her feet. She flew backward across the pit, a rag doll in the air, until she slammed into the unforgiving obsidian wall. She didn't slide down. She fell limp, hitting the floor with no attempt to catch herself. The small detonator skittered across the floor, harmlessly sliding away. Silence. Absolute, vacuum-like silence descended on the council chamber. Even the ventilation fans seemed to stop. Ronan froze. He was still straddling Draven, his fist raised, but he was staring at the small, broken heap of white silk across the room. "Sarah," he whispered. There was no movement, no rise and fall of the chest. Draven laughed. It was a gurgling, wet sound. Collateral. Damage. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew heavy, pressing down with a gravitational weight that forced the council elders to grip their armrests. The temperature plummeted. Ronan looked down at Draven. The blue light in the Alpha King's eyes died. It was replaced by a void. A white, hollow nothingness that promised the end of worlds. "You touched her," Ronan said. His voice wasn't a roar. It was a flat, dead thing. "I—" Draven's eyes widened. For the first time, he felt true terror. Not fear of defeat, but fear of extinction. Ronan didn't punch him. He didn't use technique. He reached down, plunging his hands directly into the thick muscles of Draven's neck. With a sound that made the hardest warriors in the room look away, Ronan ripped. He tore the head from the Lycan's shoulders in one savage, visceral motion. He threw the severed head across the room. It rolled to a stop at the feet of the High Elder. Ronan stood up. He didn't look at the council. He didn't look at his sister. He walked across the pit, his steps heavy, leaving bloody footprints on the stone. He fell to his knees beside Sarah. Her face was pale, translucent almost. A trickle of blood ran from her ear. Her chest was still. Her heart, that brave, foolish heart, had stopped. "No," Ronan whispered, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her, afraid he would break her more. "Sarah, come back." He placed his hand on her chest. Silence. "Medic!" Ronan screamed, the sound tearing his vocal cords. "Get a healer down here, now!" "It is too late, my king," an elder said softly from the edge of the pit. The blow. It crushed her internal organs. "She is gone." "She is not gone!" Ronan roared, turning on them with teeth bared. "She cannot go! She is my mate!" The declaration hung in the air like a thunderhead. The elder shook his head sadly. "She is human, Ronan. She was fragile. You cannot mate with the dead." Ronan looked back at Sarah. Tears, hot and angry, mixed with the blood on his face. He grabbed her limp hand. It was already cooling. "I do not accept this," Ronan gritted out. "I am the Alpha Prime. I do not accept death." He lifted his own wrist to his mouth. He bit down, hard, tearing the vein. Dark, viscous blood, glowing with a faint bioluminescence, welled up. It was the concentrated essence of the Alpha line, blood that could burn a human from the inside out or grant them immortality. "Ronan, don't!" Lyra cried out from the stands. "It will kill her faster. Her body can't handle the strain." "She is already dead," Ronan yelled back. "So I have nothing to lose." He pressed his bleeding wrist to Sarah's pale lips. He used his other hand to massage her throat, forcing the blood down. "Drink," he pleaded, his forehead resting against hers. "Fight, Sarah. You fought for me. Now fight for yourself." The blood stained her lips crimson. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. The elders began to descend into the pit to collect the bodies. They approached Ronan cautiously, as one approaches a wounded lion. "King Ronan," the High Elder said, placing a hand on Ronan's shoulder. "We must remove the body." Ronan didn't move. He held her, rocking slightly. "Give her a moment." "Ronan." "I said give her a moment!" And then a sound. A gasp. It was a terrible, jagged sound, like a drowning victim breaking the surface. Sarah's body arched violently off the floor, her back bowed, her fingers clawing at the stone. "Sarah!" Ronan grabbed her shoulders, pinning her down as she convulsed. Heat began to radiate from her. It was intense, scalding. Steam rose from her skin, curling into the cold air. The horrific bruising on her ribs began to fade, turning from black to purple to yellow, then vanishing entirely in seconds. The blood running from her ear stopped. The dent in her skull popped back into place with a sickening, audible click. Sarah screamed. It was a scream of agony, of a body being rewired on a cellular level. "I'm here," Ronan soothed, holding her through the seizure. "I've got you. Let it burn. Let it change you." She opened her eyes. The council gasped. Sarah's eyes were no longer the warm hazel of a human. They were liquid silver, swirling with flecks of gold. The pupils were vertical, predatory slits that dilated rapidly in the dim light. She coughed, expelling a clot of black blood, and took a deep, rattling breath. "Ronan," she croaked. Her voice sounded different, deeper, vibrating with a new resonance. "I'm here," Ronan wept, pulling her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. "I'm here, my brave, stupid girl." Sarah blinked, her vision sharpening. She looked at her hand. The fingernails were slightly longer, harder. She looked at the stone wall across the room. She could see the individual grains of dust floating in the air. She could hear the heartbeat of the elder, standing 10 feet away. Thump, 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 thump. She pushed herself up. She felt electric. The pain was gone, replaced by a humming, boundless energy. She looked at Ronan. He looked exhausted, broken, and more in love than she thought possible. "You gave me your blood," she whispered. "I gave you my life," he corrected. Sarah stood up. She wobbled slightly, but Ronan was there to steady her. She looked at the council elders surrounding them. The High Elder stared at her with a mixture of fear and reverence. He looked at the dead lichen, then at the woman who had defied the grave. "The blood took," the elder murmured. "She did not turn, but she absorbed the essence. It is a legend. The wolf blood." He looked at Ronan. "You have broken the law, King Ronan. You have made a human into a hybrid." Ronan stood tall, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist. He bared his teeth at his own counsel. "She killed the traitor," Ronan growled. "She saved your king. She survived the Alpha blood. Does anyone here wish to challenge her right to stand by my side?" He looked around the circle. "Victor Draven challenged me. Look where he is. Who is next?" The silence stretched. Sarah stepped forward. She didn't hide behind Ronan. She stood equal to him. Her silver eyes swept over the 12 powerful shifters. She didn't bow. She waited. The High Elder looked into those silver eyes. He saw the power there. He saw the future. Slowly, stiffly, the High Elder dropped to one knee. "Long live the king," the elder said, bowing his head. Then he turned his gaze to Sarah. And long live the queen. One by one, the other elders knelt. The guards on the perimeter knelt. Lyra, up in the stands, knelt, tears streaming down her face. Sarah looked at the sea of bowed heads. She felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the danger, the power. She looked up at Ronan. "I think," she whispered, a small, tired smile tugging at her lips, "I'm going to need a new job description." Ronan kissed her forehead, the bloody, beautiful king of the wolves. "We'll figure it out," he promised, together. 3 months later. The winter in the Methau Valley was harsh, but the new lodge was built to withstand anything. It was a fortress of timber and stone, hidden deep within the tree line, invisible to the human world, but a beacon to the pack. Sarah stood on the expansive deck, watching the snow fall. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She wore a heavy coat lined with grey fur, black tactical pants, and boots laced tight. A rifle was slung over her shoulder, a custom piece, balanced perfectly for her enhanced strength. The door behind her opened. Lyra stepped out, holding a steaming mug of coffee. Kian was asleep inside, a robust, happy baby who had already started teething, with very sharp little teeth. "You're up early," Lyra said, leaning against the railing. "Couldn't sleep," Sarah replied. She took the coffee, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. The perimeter sensors picked up movement in Sector 4. Could be elk, could be a scout from the southern pack. Lyra shook her head, smiling. "You take this queen business very seriously. Most queens just plan galas and buy expensive shoes." "I almost died for this life, Lyra," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I'm going to protect it." A sound echoed from the forest, a deep, resonant howl that made the snow fall from the pine branches. Sarah smiled. A massive black wolf burst from the tree line, kicking up a spray of white powder. It bounded toward the lodge, powerful and majestic. As it reached the stairs, the form shimmered and shifted. Ronan stood there, breathing hard, snowflakes caught in his dark hair. He was shirtless despite the freezing temperature, his skin radiating heat. He ran up the stairs and scooped Sarah into his arms, lifting her off her feet. "Put me down," she laughed, though she wrapped her legs around his waist. "Never," Ronan growled, burying his face in her neck, inhaling her scent. Pine, snow, and wolf. "I missed you." "You were gone for 2 hours on patrol," Sarah teased. "2 hours too long," he murmured. He set her down, but kept his hands on her hips. "The Southern Pack is testing the borders. They heard the rumors. They want to know if the Wolf-Blood Queen is real." Sarah adjusted the rifle on her shoulder. Her eyes flashed that dangerous, beautiful silver. "Let's go show them," she said. Ronan grinned, his canines lengthening slightly. He looked at his mate, the nurse who saved his son, the human who defied death, the woman who ruled his heart. "After you, my queen," he said. They turned toward the woods together, side by side, running into the wild, ready for whatever war the world wanted to bring them next. And that, my friends, is the legend of Sarah Miller, the nurse who went to war for a stranger and became the queen of the wolves. It's a story about how family isn't just blood, it's who you bleed for. I hope you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story. If you want more intense fantasy sagas like this, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a part. And let me know in the comments, do you think Sarah should have turned into a full wolf, or is she cooler as a wolf-blood human? I'll see you in the next video. Stay wild.